Yo, what is up guys? Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. So, Devin Haney comprehensively outboxes George Kambosos Jr. to become the new undisputed champion at 135. Now, the way this fight played out did not surprise me in the slightest. Going into this one, I was fairly confident that, Devin Haney stylistically would prove to be a big puzzle for George Kambosos, one that he couldn't solve. And that really proved to be the point in this fight. I think my problem leading into this fight, I felt there was a lot of narratives surrounding George Kambosos that were being put out there that purely and simply weren't true in regards to what sort of fighter he was. Ultimately, for me, George Kambosos is, I'd say he's like an aggressive counterpuncher who likes to sit in at mid-range. I think that's where George Kambosos is at his best. But, people out there were acting like Kambosos is an amazing pressure fighter with devastating power, that sort of thing. I never really saw that to be the case. I've always felt that George Kambosos, yes, he's a pretty good fighter, don't get me wrong, but he is very one-dimensional in his approach. If you take aside the Teofimo Lopez fight, you go back and watch those Mickey Bay fights, and the Lee Selby fight, Kambosos had a real hard time when those guys were giving him a bit of movement, trying to stick to the outside, utilising that jab. When those guys stood with Kambosos, then Kambosos had success and countered very effectively, but Kambosos isn't a guy who likes to engage in a long range boxing match, and that is what Devin Haney is best at. That's where Devin Haney is most comfortable, when he can, take that half step back, pop the jab, keep you at arm's length, and he'll pick you off, from the outside. And if you get too close, he'll try and clinch up on you and make you reset that way. We know what Devin Haney's style is, and to me, it was always kryptonite for someone like George Kambosos, and we saw that in this fight. Early on, I felt that Kambosos was actually countering quite effectively. Haney was trying to hold the distance and keep Kambosos at arm's length, but he was too flat-footed. He was jabbing with Kambosos and not really offering as much foot movement. And early on in this fight, Kambosos actually got a couple of good counters off. I think it was round 2 where he caught Devin Haney with a pretty good overhand right, I believe it was. So early on, again, he was losing the jab battle, Kambosos, but he was landing the odd counterpunch here and there. But, again, something else I said going into this fight, when Kambosos did catch Devin Haney, it didn't really do anything. There was never any tangible effect on Devin Haney. Again, I felt a lot of people overrated Kambosos' power going into this fight based on one knockdown against Teofimo Lopez, a Lopez who fought a dumb fight. So the power in this fight, the so-called power of George Kambosos, was exposed. He doesn't really have much. It's just that simple. But yeah, after the first couple of rounds, I felt Devin Haney really started to get behind that stick, and he started to jab and move. He was stepping off the side of George Kambosos, not letting George Kambosos get to mid-range where he can counter. Haney wasn't letting his back touch the ropes. He was just dictating where this fight was fought. And whenever this fight did get close, Devin Haney was clinching quite a lot, and that is one negative aspect of his performance for me. There was far too much clinching from Devin Haney as this fight played out. That has to be said. But again, that plays into another point I made going into this fight. Devin Haney is not going to get a raw deal in Australia. He's the top-ranked guy, and what do you know? The referee was quite kind to him. Haney was able to get away with a lot of holding. But when this fight was on the outside, there was only one winner. I mean, yeah, Kambosos landed the odd shot, which had no effect, but Haney's jab was pretty active against George Kambosos. He was marking up George Kambosos with that jab. He did the basics in this fight, Devin Haney. He didn't do anything special. What he did was utilise that height and reach, utilise those legs, kept it with straight punches primarily, and he outboxed and outpointed George Kambosos. George Kambosos coming in behind that kind of Philly shell side-on stance. He was trying to catch and counter Devin Haney, but Devin Haney did a good job of stepping out to the side, keeping it from range, keeping Kambosos at arm's length. And again, sometimes boxing is simple, Taller, longer man, just utilise those straight punches, utilise those legs, keep it at distance. And really, that's all Devin Haney did here. He pulled off a pretty solid display. Kambosos' style was rendered pretty ineffective against Devin Haney. Ideally, George Kambosos needed to make adjustments as this fight played out. Maybe in the mid-rounds, try to switch things up, try to be more aggressive, maybe come forward behind a high guard, a bit of head movement, trying to get close to Haney and maybe work away. But again, primarily that isn't Kambosos' style, and I was saying that going into this fight, George Kambosos isn't that sort of fighter. He's not an all-out pressure fighter. He is somewhat aggressive, but again, primarily he's a counter-puncher, and the boxer gave the counter-puncher no opportunities to really land anything. But yeah, I think in this fight, Kambosos' style kind of got exposed as one-dimensional. I'm not saying he's a bad fighter per se, but again, I reiterate, and I said this long before this fight was signed against Devin Haney. I said that the Lopez fight, to me, was a mirage. I think it was one of those moments where he just caught Teofimo on the right night. And I think that win has really overinflated people's opinions on George Kambosos. Again, time will tell. Maybe Kambosos goes on from here and has more success. But honestly, I wouldn't pick Kambosos to be any top lightweight. Quite frankly, not anymore. I think he had his moment in the sun against Teofimo Lopez, and it won't get any better than that. That's how I see it. I don't think it's going to get any better than that for George Kambosos. Again, we shall see though. We shall see. But again, don't act like... I know there's going to be some new people here saying you're not giving Devin Haney credit, blah, blah, blah. If you ask anybody who's followed this channel for a long time, I've not really rated George Kambosos that highly. Just that's the only thing I can say in regards to that. But again, what can I say for Devin Haney? He did what he needed to do. It was one of those sort of fights. It was quite uneventful, quite dull, in fact. I mean, as a spectacle, it wasn't all that entertaining. But again, I expected that, so I'm not really going to complain too much there. But yeah, I mean, what more can I say? I mean, I think it was quite a straightforward fight. I really do. Now, going forwards, what is next? Well, apparently George Kambosos has a rematch clause in Australia again. No interest whatsoever. I mean, this wasn't a close fight. I think we've seen who is the more effective boxer, especially when you put these two styles together, and that is Devin Haney. I don't see the point in going over old ground, but in the contract there's a rematch clause, so potentially Devin Haney will have to fight George Kambosos again in Australia. If that happens, I expect the exact same result in the exact same fight, quite frankly. And who knows what happens going on from there. I mean, I'd like to see Devin Haney fight Ryan Garcia, Lomachenko, Tank Davis, all of these guys, man. There's some good fights out there for him. Again, ideally, he would go into one of those fights next, but this rematch clause is in the way, and we're saying that a lot in regards to boxing recently about these fucking rematch clauses for one-sided fights, is what it is. What can I say? But yeah, Devin Haney is the undisputed champion at lightweight, carries all of the belts now at 135, and we'll see where he goes from here. But yeah, this was an easy win. This was an easy, routine performance by Devin Haney, and yeah, he should build on that now. He should get confidence from it, and we'll see where he goes. Share your thoughts below. Peace.